For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and on the talking point today, India's ambassador to the Philippines, Shambhu S.Kumaran. Ambassador Kumaran, good to see you after a while.
It's wonderful to be here.
Our pleasure completely. The meetings between EAM and, of course, the Philippine Foreign Secretary will be taking forward the momentum that has been building up over the months, especially after the EAM's meeting in February in the Philippines. But one of the main pillars in the headline news everywhere, of course, is the defense pillar between India and the Philippines and the BrahMos. And congratulations for that deal, to you and everyone who's involved in that. $374 million is no joke, and the significance of that. But would you say that one of the driving forces for that is the common characteristic of security concerns that both India and the Philippines have vis-a-vis China? Of course, it's different dimension, territorial and maritime.
Well, Amitabh, I think the relationship with the Philippines has been developing slowly over a period of time. And you're right in saying that over the past decade, the developments in the region, in the Indo-Pacific, if you will, have forced countries such as the Philippines, as well as to a certain extent even India, through Prime Ministers Act East and Saga in particular, to address the security imperatives of our partners. And the Philippines, under President Duterte, is following something called an independent foreign policy, where they want to broaden their partnerships, broad-base their relationships with different countries. And India is among the forefront of those partnerships that they're seeking. So definitely the momentum that you're witnessing is both a culmination of the slow, steady relationship building that's happened over the years, but sharper because of the recent developments in the region, definitely.
When you look at the Philippines itself, it's a treaty ally of the US. I mean, there were issues there with the US, with President Duterte, with the VFA, etc. Would you put that in context? Because a country acquiring a BrahMos for whatever security concerns, despite being a treaty ally of the US, which means that they act in each other's defense if anything goes wrong, that becomes even more significant, I presume, in terms of Philippines want to diversifying its strategy?
Yes, I mean, to my understanding, the Philippines-US relationship is very strong, on a very strong footing. They do have a very historic relationship, and the Philippines remains an important ally for the United States as well. And obviously, these relationships have their vicissitudes from time to time. But the fundamental, I think, interests of both countries seem to be served by that. But speaking about our relationship, definitely, I don't see any contradiction in the fact that the Philippines is building a wider set of partnerships, obviously while maintaining its traditional partnerships. And I think that's the way the Filipinos also looking at India. I don't think it is an either-or relationship. In the current multi-sort of vector world, obviously countries have to build broader partnerships. We ourselves do it, and I think it's quite natural that the Filipinos also doing it.
And apart from the BrahMos, I mean, you've gone on record to say that other defense platforms are being looked at, whether it's aerospace, naval, even the army. I presume the LCA in Singapore may have made an impact, or the ALH. What can you share with us on what the Philippines is looking at, especially since it's, again, one of the relationships that India looks for in its defense partnerships, that is to move beyond just a buyer-seller kind of.
So for the Philippines, I think India definitely comes in as a partner, both in terms of the quality of our equipment, but also in terms of the broader capacity that the relationship between the armed forces in particular can bring. So they are looking at they have these horizons of armed forces modernization in plan, formally stated. And obviously, there are various capacities that they are seeking in which India could be a potential partner. And obviously, all of these relations, all of these decisions on these capability enhancements are in a competitive sort of environment. And our companies would need to compete. And we've been quite engaged from the diplomatic perspective to convince the Philippines leadership, especially in the Department of National Defense. And, remember, Secretary Lorenzana made the first ever visit in 2018. So it's a fairly young defense relationship, but we do have two official institutional mechanisms. We have the Joint Defense Cooperation Committee and the Joint Working Group that deals with defense industry and logistics. And these discussions have obviously opened up a lot of opportunities for Indian companies to make themselves present in the Philippines market. Aerospace platforms, definitely both fixed wing, the Tejas you mentioned, as well as rotary platforms, definitely an area of focus, as are naval platforms and other maritime security related capabilities. But it's fairly early to talk about the decisions on this because the next phase of the modernization program is just being rolled out. Key procurements have been made in the recent past, of which BrahMos was a part, but obviously we will continue to remain engaged and hopefully we'll have good news in the future.
Looking at the current geopolitical situation and the sanctions every day that we see against Russia, don't know how CAATSA, which is American law, of course, will be enforced on various platforms, plus the misfiring of the BrahMos that went into Pakistan. Now, would you like to set the record straight on what happened in the Philippines post that?
Well, the Philippines contract for BrahMos is a bilateral contract. It's with an Indian entity, BrahMos Aerospace, which, as it's public knowledge, that it's a partnership with Russia. So, having said that, it's a bilateral relationship, a bilateral contract. And I don't see any difficulties on account of the larger global developments impacting on this partnership between India and the Philippines. And I believe there's been some reportage around how there's been some sort of rethink, etc. It's completely, I'd like to reassure all your viewers that the proposal for BrahMos is firmly set on track, and we are very confident that we'll be able to deliver that on time. It's a very prestigious contract for us, a very important contract for the Philippines, and we are both determined to make it happen. In terms of the build-up of other elements that have come in, recent developments, etc., there's really no impact that I could see. As I had clarified in one other interaction I had earlier with the think tank, there was a query, and we just clarified based on the statement that had been issued by our defense ministry. So that set the matter to rest, and the contract continues to move ahead.
And again, like what I'm saying, when India looks for defense partnerships, you want to move to the next stage, which is out of this buyer-seller relationship. So it's fair if when India is dealing with a third country that they would also want that. How is that evolving?
Yeah, so this is always a complex question in terms of the time frame in which capabilities have to be acquired. And obviously, there are some capabilities that the Philippine side would like to have on a fairly short time frame, in which case you cannot move towards any serious manufacturing cooperation. But in terms of the rotary platforms, for example, on the air side, we've offered fairly extensive MRO and other support and extensive training support, which perhaps unmatched by other suppliers. And definitely we've also given the offer to the Philippine side that we're willing to work on more ambitious frameworks, wherein a degree of capability accretion can happen in the Philippines itself. It's going to be a process. I think we've got into this partnership now. We've had this very major successful contract. We're having a very positive conversation. And I think there will be with time, potentially more deeper cooperation, collaboration that can be envisaged. Very definitely can be done.
The other big pillar is, of course, economic, and major driver of relations between India and the Philippines. Just taking it sector by sector, if possible. Health, because of COVID, has kind of been magnified, and how India can help. And again, I presume it would be beyond just a buyer-seller kind of a relationship even there.
Yeah, you see, for me personally, I think, of course, the defense relationship has got a lot of attention, particularly in India. But in terms of the partnership, I really think that, as you said, there are two pillars. There's the national security pillar, where we both try to complement each other's capabilities. But there's the other very critical pillar of developmental pathways. And what is very interesting for the Philippines is that India, in many ways, is a larger sort of framework, very similar to what the Philippines has. It's a fairly populous country, second largest country in ASEAN, 13th largest in the world. And obviously they have that developmental requirements which mirror ours. So when COVID came in, definitely India's capabilities in terms of vaccine production in particular became extremely visible, and the Philippine side have opened up a far broader degree of engagement with us. We are today the largest supplier of pharmaceutical products to the Philippines. The Philippines is India's largest pharma market in ASEAN. Last year, we crossed for the first time $300 million worth of exports. Surely there's interest in the Philippines here again in terms of bringing some of that capacity, production capacity into the Philippines. And our companies have engaged. One of the issues there is that obviously the procurement decisions in terms of incentivizing local manufacturing, those need to be taken and legally sort of worked through by the Philippine side, and we've pointed to that. The interesting thing is also there's been some Philippines investment into India as well. So there are Philippines pharma companies who invested in India, and there are a few Indian pharma companies already invested in the Philippines. So we could see this growing, and health definitely across the space. We had last month a very successful business conference bringing the B2B framework for our companies and the Philippines companies to speak about medical devices, about healthcare and pharma. So, and the attention was very much there on both sides. And the fact is, I think as travel eases, as companies and representatives can move faster and better talk to each other directly, I would expect that there will be significant progress. One example, the Philippines, one of the largest business groups in the Philippines, the ALA Group, is setting up a very large cancer hospital, the first cancer specialty hospital in the Philippines. And they have actually studied the Indian hospital system and taken a lot of lessons from here. And obviously the success of that model, they were very open in telling me that it is because of the Indian pharma products that the affordability factor comes in, which makes this whole model worthwhile. So partnerships work both in terms of investment, in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience sharing. One of the largest healthcare groups in the Philippines now is headed by an Indian medical expert. So definitely this whole process of knowledge transfer. One example is that we have these children who are affected with terrible liver problems. And we've brought them into the Philippines, from the Philippines into India. But there's now a conversation between our hospitals and the Philippines hospital to try and bring the Philippine doctors into India to train here so they can go back and perform those surgeries there. So definitely this is a partnership that's empowering both sides and is of interest to both sides.
Talking about empowering both sides, development model, lessons learned, successful models, in terms of digital governance and say direct benefit transfers, that's something that Philippines is extremely interested in? Absolutely.
Very pertinent, very live debate in the Philippines. They have introduced a new national ID system. Here again, one of the Indian companies is the main systems integrator. It's a very large contract. And it's based on an Indian developed MOSIP platform, which the World Bank has been supporting. So what we're seeing is that the digital governance experience in India, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, definitely that experience is very valuable for the Philippines because they have very similar social and equity considerations. So using new digital technologies and the fact that India was able to transfer direct benefits during COVID to hundreds of millions of people has not gone unnoticed. So we're working it on three separate tracks actually. Obviously, there are the Indian companies who will be working with Philippines government contracts, etc. That's already happening. More can happen. We have a bilateral governmental dialogue that we've started between the two finance ministries, which speaks about fintech, digital payments, digital settlements, and also about using national IDs for direct benefit transfer. And the third area is that there's the larger Indian experience with e-governance and the lessons that are being learned out of that are of great interest to the Philippines. Here, interesting elements come in. For example, our agri-tech capacities. Very, very appropriate for the Philippines because some of the concerns that they have are similar to ours. They have small land holdings, a lot of marginal farmers, and how do they get to market on time, and how do they get the right price, and how do they use the right mix of various inputs into their farming process. So definitely a broader digitally enabled governance dialogue is at the heart of this new partnership that we're building.
You mentioned agriculture, fintech, IT, BPO. Already Indian footprints are there, and are they getting larger?
It's a massive IT BPO footprint. All the Indian major companies are there. My estimate and the embassy is that we've got anywhere between 180,000 to 200,000 jobs in the BPO sector from Indian companies. And a lot of the US-based companies that are present also have very strong India connections. So definitely India and the BPO sector are a very strong area of partnership for the Philippines, and it's growing. What we've been trying to do is to get these BPO process companies to also look at training young Filipinos, because the world in terms of the industry there is shifting towards KPO and more of the data analytical and AI-driven systems. So obviously our companies are slightly ahead, and we need to have this platform where we can bring in more and more young Filipinos also, upskill them, reskill them, and bring them into this whole process. So it's in our mutual interest to do so, and companies are already doing it.
In terms of the larger picture between India and Philippines in the economy, we've seen ECTA with Australia, CEPA with UAE, UK, US, Israel, lots of them in the pipeline. Is there any movement towards a preferential?
Yes, we've actually had an in-principle agreement as early as 2020 to move ahead with the preferential trade agreement discussion. Unfortunately, I think partly due to capacity constraints on our side because of all these large trade negotiations that we are having, given the fact that this is obviously a comparatively smaller relationship, obviously we will revisit it as soon as we can. And we are very interested. I think the potential is there for both sides to benefit from allowing each other preferential trade access. The Philippine side is very conscious of the fact that they have been sort of also at the receiving end of the loss of manufacturing, some of the concerns that we had with regard to RCEP. These concerns, agricultural groups have been concerned because it's a very largely agriculture dependent country. So obviously that discussion is of interest, and I hope that we can revisit that discussion fairly quickly whenever our negotiators are able to do so.
Like you mentioned, that's another commonality, RCEP, and the concerns that India has, whether it's third origin, China, etc. That debate, I think, has been, or at least a decision has been postponed till possibly after the elections. And how is CPTPP?
It's a live issue there. There are various groups which have come out expressing concerns, which echo concerns that were expressed in India as well. So, but I feel that the Philippines government and the Ministry of Trade and Industry is quite, the Department of Trade and Industry is quite committed to moving ahead with RCEP, and that discussion is ongoing. But the fact that these concerns were flagged and that the decision-making process was impacted obviously indicates that there is a sense of disquiet there as well. So obviously all countries, while we would all prefer to go in for very open trade, there has to be, the historical experience has to reflect that the benefits are balanced. You cannot have a situation where one country benefits disproportionately and other countries lose even existing capacity. So I think this is a genuine concern that has come up in the Philippines in the context of RCEP.
But they're looking at, say, the CPTPP pretty favorably in the Philippines.
Yeah, so the sense there I get is that the Philippines wants to be part of as many trading arrangements as possible because many of their neighboring countries in ASEAN are also part of those and they don't want to be left behind. But at the same time, there are these other questions, so they need to reconcile those two issues. Broadly speaking, I think business and government seem to be looking towards joining as many such arrangements as possible.
And talking about groupings, how is the Quad viewed in the Philippines? Are they interested in the Quad's agenda if it is enlarged in any manner?
It was interesting that when External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar visited the Philippines, he was returning from the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting. So that provided an opportunity for the minister to lay out the vision that Quad had for the region. And that the Philippines Foreign Secretary expressed a very strong sense of identification with the kind of activities that Quad has, and definitely the recognition of ASEAN centrality and the desire from Quad to work with ASEAN on the priorities that ASEAN has been very well received in the Philippines.
And is support for the India-Philippines relationship in all its dimensions across the political spectrum? Is it bipartisan? I mean, there are elections coming up, and in the polls, of course, you have Bongbong Marcos leading there. There's a current vice president.
I've had opportunity to interact with a wide variety of political actors in the Philippines, and I sense that the interest in a broad-based partnership with India is across the political space. There's really no person who said that, that they would like to reprioritize their relationship with India. I think the sense across the interesting contrast is in terms of public opinion, because when we had the agreement on the defense side, for example, the response, especially in social media in the Philippines, was extremely positive. Compare that to some of the other countries with whom the Philippines has very, the public opinion is very testy and prickly about some of the activities of other countries. So definitely both from the point of view of the political formations, but the larger public perception of the value of this partnership. And as I said, a lot of Indian companies there, they create a lot of value in the Philippines economy. Yeah, Filipinos are interested in discovering India, its culture, its civilizational ethos. They themselves want to, we have also been talking about things like Ayurveda and yoga, which are very, very well received. So there is an enormous degree of interest and enthusiasm in the Philippines for this India relationship.
So this perception that if Marcos Jr. comes the next president and he's seen to be more closer to China, there shouldn't be any hiccups on the India-Philippines.
No, I think the India-Philippines relationship stands on its own track, and I don't think we would allow any of our other partnerships to affect our relations with other countries. So I sense that in the Philippines, the same would apply. They would want to definitely build this relationship, as I said, for all the extensive value propositions that are there, some of them proven, some of them being proven. Definitely a powerful narrative around the value of cooperation has been established. And looking ahead, it can be built into one of the drivers of the India-ASEAN engagement. It's a surprise it hadn't happened earlier. Perhaps we didn't pay enough attention, because here is a country which is very much like India, large populace, extremely talented people, a very young demography, a democratic country.
English speaking.
So definitely you look at the Philippines and India. In fact, Secretary Dominguez was Secretary of Finance and very closely associated with India in his previous capacity as Agriculture Minister. When the first time I met him, he said, "Ambassador, there are no two countries in the world so similar like India and the Philippines." And this is something that I've heard from many other Filipinos. Obviously, we need to have a degree of diplomatic attention, maintain that. And one of the very positive things is that from the Prime Minister at our end, the External Affairs Minister was there. Now, as you said, Secretary Locsin is on a return visit. There is a greater political focus on this relationship, which augurs very well for the future.
Ambassador Kumaran, an absolute pleasure talking to you. Who would have known 20, 25 years back that we'd be doing this?
I know when we were studying together international relations, those are the days when we started off with our Look East policy, matured into something very definitive.
And you're making that happen.
Well, wonderful to be with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure is ours. So do send in your comments about this particular interview. If you have any, engage with us on YouTube, on our other social media sites for a perspective from New Delhi of foreign policy. This is The Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.